All right, it is officially 3:02 Pacific Standard Time. It is 5:02 in Chicago, the Central Standard Time where I am today. My name is Dominique Hollins. For those who do not know me, I am the founder and connector in chief of WĒ360, which is a DEIB consulting firm, which stands for 360 Degrees of Workplace Equity. I wanted to have today's discussion because there is an unimaginable amount of turmoil that we are facing as a nation right now. And that turmoil is exacerbated depending on which marginalized community you're a part of, or there could be several marginalized communities you could be a part of. And we're talking about intersectionality today of race, gender, and sexuality. I'd like to start with a couple of data points just to put today's conversation into context. We are experiencing a global pandemic. Well, we're experiencing a pandemic that's redundant. And the United States, while we are just 4% of the global population, we represent more than 20% of the cases. Now, that's at the national level. What makes this even harder is that for the Black, the Latinx, Alaskan Native, Native American, Asian communities, we find that those numbers are even worse. In fact, for American Indian or Alaskan Natives, there are 2.8 times more cases or more likely to experience COVID cases. In the Asian non-Hispanic community, they're 1.1 times more likely to experience that case. In the Black and African American community, 2.6 times more likely to experience a COVID case. And for the Hispanic or Latino community, they're 2.8 times more likely to experience a case. And then those numbers increase when it comes to hospitalization. And sadly, those numbers go up again when it comes to the death count. So for people of color, these circumstances are worse than the national average. And on top of that, if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, they were not even tracking data for the LGBTQ community until June of this year. So while we have been in the midst of COVID since, some would argue, November, more actively in February and then in March, they didn't even start to track COVID cases in the LGBTQ community until June. So today I wanted to create the space with 5 incredible speakers that I've had the pleasure of meeting through the work and doing the work towards DEI. I've run into each of them in their respective communities, doing the work for all of us. I wanted to have a conversation with them today, not only to give you insight into their experience, but in an effort to get some insights and best practices that we can actively do with each other as a community to support each other. Because the truth is, we're all we got. We are suffering the worst out of every demographic when it comes to COVID and what we're experiencing. And the truth is, we are best suited to support each other along the way. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panelists, but the best way to do that is to have them do it for themselves. So I'm just going to call on my panelists, and I'm going to ask you to just tell the community a little bit about yourself before I go into your identity and your workspace. So I'm going to start today with B, Pagels-Minor, if you're all right with telling us a little bit about yourself and welcoming the community to the panel discussion today.
Hello, everyone. So first of all, I have a little sinus infection, so if some sneezing goes on, you don't even have to say bless you. Like, I know in your spirit you're saying it to me, so we're all good. So my name is B. Pagels-Minor. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am a product person at Netflix. I'm a recent transplant to the Bay Area. I've been here since 2018, and but I say I'm a Southerner, right? So like when I think about my home, I'm from like the Mississippi, Tennessee area, and in fact you're gonna hear some y'alls and stuff like that. And then when I think about my identity, I identify as a Black trans non-binary lesbian. Which is, that's a lot to kind of take in there. But I always tell people, I've fought my whole life to be a lesbian, and now that I'm trans non-binary, nobody gets to take that one from me. So that's a little bit about me.
Wow. Well, who wants to follow that? I'm just going to allow you to hop in. I would recommend Nick, but if anyone else wants to go. Thank you so much, B, for kicking us off.
Hello, everyone. First off, B, thank you for that wonderful introduction there. Just like you, I'm also kind of from the South. I'm from Kentucky originally. I'm actually in Kentucky now. So, but yes, my name is Nick Yeast. My pronouns are he, him. Like I said, originally from the South and lived in the Bay Area for the last 3.5 years now. I am currently the founder and CEO of the Nick Ricardo Collection, as well as a new company that I have actually just launched this past month, or excuse me, in August, Jackson and Yeast Logistics. And we are a freight transportation company, and we're servicing the Southeast region of the United States. So yeah, a lot has been going on this year, and I can't wait to kind of dive into that and have y'all get to know me a little bit more and get to know you all. That's just a little bit about me. And yes, I will be saying y'all a lot too. Probably those Southern roots have not gone anywhere, I'll tell you that.
Thank you so much, Nick. And who'd like to take it away next?
I can go.
Take it away, Josh.
Thanks, Tom. And yeah, I kind of just want to start by thanking you, Dom, and thanking everyone for being here. It's an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to speak and to be invited to speak. So just really, really happy to be in community with all of y'all. I'm not from the South. That y'all is just what I've kind of like put into my language because I like y'all. I'm from Massachusetts. My family is from Puerto Rico. I was born in the States and kind of have lived my life here. My pronouns are he, him. Let's mention that. And what else? Identity. I identify as bisexual, but I like the term queer because I feel like it gives me some fluidity in expressing like my gender and expressing my sexuality, which has kind of fluctuated throughout my life. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Thank you so much, Josh, and welcome. I think we have two more superstars just itching to introduce themselves.
I'll go ahead. I'm Say. I go by they, them pronouns. And I identify as non-binary, queer, Asian American, as well as Christian based in Oakland. And I'm continually building bridges, as you can probably hear by my identity, between seemingly opposing groups, male, female, Asian, American, queer, Christian. I'm also a drummer, filmmaker, comedian, consultant on creativity, employer branding, storytelling, and DEI. And I'm super pumped. I just finished writing an allegorical novel about my wildlife called The Spineless Porcupine that will be out in December. So keep an eye on that on Amazon and other better platforms. I don't want to push Amazon, but it's on there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Say. Hey, I appreciate it, and I look forward to learning more about your journey. And last but not least, Adi Mendiola Barreto.
Thanks, Dom. Hey, y'all. Yes, my name is Adi Mendiola Barreto. I use they, them pronouns, but today I'm also feeling he, him pronouns, so whatever feels good for you. Both of those as options feel fantastic for me. I am the director of community at Individual. I build platforms for people with voices that need to be heard by community. And how I identify, okay, so this has been a journey for many, many reasons, but the identity that is most accurate to my experience here on Turtle Island is that I am a white settler, second generation Mexican and Puerto Rican, non-binary, trans, gender fluid, fruta, and I am absolutely unapologetically, unconditionally queer. And yeah, that is me.
Wow. So hopefully you all enjoy the fact that I intentionally curated what I hope to be a fantastic panel. And out of respect for this community, my pronouns are she, her, and I have been actively working to make sure that I get my pronouns correct out of respect for many of the panelists that I've asked to be here today. So there are three goals that I have for all of us in this conversation. One is that amongst the LGBTQ community, we are oppressing each other. Every community oppresses each other in some form or fashion. If you're amongst men, then you're probably using economic status or some other way to evaluate who's more manly in a situation. If you're in a woman's community or identify as a woman, then we're typically put against one another in order to determine who's the more dominant woman in a room. In the LGBTQ community, who's more lesbian than another? What is bisexual? Who gets to be bisexual? There are a lot of things amongst our community that are taking place. There's a lack of education. And as we demand it of the cisgender heteronormative community, we must also be sure to give that same respect to one another. And as I have experienced our panelists, I found some errors in my ways, and there's some things I need to work on. So I want to give you all that opportunity to see what you don't see, your blind spots, to figure out what you're going to do about it. And if we can work together better, then we can collectively address some of the external forces that are making it more difficult for us to simply live a life of joy. That being said, I have some questions that I've curated. I want us to quickly get through these with our panelists so I can open the floor to some of you. The other side of this is, if you are not a member of the LGBTQ community, if you are not a non-white person or a person of color or someone who identifies on that spectrum, and you consider yourself to be an ally, then this is the time to be a sponge, to determine what you don't know, to see what you can learn today to further your current state of learning, and also connect with these panelists. They're doing some pretty phenomenal things. If we don't have enough time today, I encourage you to reach out to them afterwards and see how many ways you can engage with them, either individually or through your organization. So without further ado, this is open to all panelists. I'm gonna ask you to tell me your coming out story. And I know that this, for some of you, could be a little more dramatic than others, but I say that because that journey then, I feel like we're still in the coming out story today. When we finally told our family and our friends, now we're constantly reminding society who we are and what that means. And for me, as a bisexual woman, I spent most of my time only calling myself a lesbian because I didn't want to be judged by the gay community, and I didn't want to be judged by the straight community. And today I can walk in that. So what I'd love to do is kick it off. Josh, if you wouldn't mind, since you inspired me to embrace more of my sexuality, can you talk about what it was like to come out and what that means to you in present day corporate America? And if you could do so in about 2 minutes, that would be even more fantastic.
I will do my best. You might have to play some Oscar music down.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I'm bisexual as how I identify. That's been quite the journey to get to that. Similar to Dom, I now stand in that truth with a lot of confidence. But I think for a long time, there's a phrase in Spanish that a lot of immigrants use: "Ni de aquí ni de allá," and it's like, I'm not from here, I'm not from there. And I've felt that in like being American-born Puerto Rican. And I've also felt that in my sexuality when I would walk into rooms and gay spaces with gay men, not really fully being embraced, or, comments being made about women that were like, frankly, like sexist. And then me still wanting to kind of embrace this bisexual identity, and then being in heterosexual straight spaces, and really not finding any type of community in those spaces. But I guess I'll say, I'm trying to like do this quickly. Identity for me is ever shifting. And I think that I'm always coming out in some way. I'm always learning more about myself, and that's the journey that I am on. It's why queer feels so much more comfortable to me in so many ways. Like, I think my gender expression is something that's fluid, and sometimes I can feel really feminine, and I want to embrace that. And I want the freedom to embrace that so I can feel really empowered in my spirit. And I think that, identity is this moving target, and I hope that was 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Josh, and I appreciate that. And that is one dimension from Josh's perspective. Who else would like to speak to their coming out story and how that shows up for you today?
I can throw something on here. It's actually really interesting because I actually went home this weekend to Mississippi, Tennessee, and I was talking to one of my older cousins. So she's kind of like that ratchet cousin that you love, that like is the one who exposes you to all the different things. And it was so funny because, I was explaining to her my identity, because I've been slowly telling my family, like, I am trans, I go by B, those types of things, because my family's super Southern, and many of them are older. And she was just like, you've been different since the beginning. She's like, in fact, when you first came out to your mother, so like I came out, like, so in high school, I was pretty much just asexual. I was just a nerd who was just like, let me study as hard as possible to get the heck out of here, to go to a nice college so I can make a lot of money. That's the only thing. So like literally I was like, my sexuality was graduate. That was my only sexuality in high school. And so when I went to college, freshman year, I actually did come out as a lesbian, and it was because I fell for my roommate. It was like literally, honestly, it was a crappy lesbian novel. Like that was literally our story. And we ended up dating and getting together, and it was just so funny. It was so funny because I called my mom, and my mom was just like, "I got $50." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "We've been betting on the fact that you've been a lesbian for like your whole life." Right. So it was very much like this, like really seamless experience for me in that sense. However, the thing that was very interesting for me is that in the lesbian community that I really kind of came and grew up in like between Memphis and Chicago, there was like this very much this like butch and femme type of dynamic, and you were supposed to be one or the other. And if you weren't, there was no place for you. And I remember one of the best moments of my entire life. One of my friends, like, we're all drinking after softball because we are those types of lesbians. And we're after softball. She looks over at me and she goes, "Bro, you're not really like a bro." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "You don't really like the stuff that we like. You don't have to do this stuff. Like, if you don't like it, just like don't do it." And I was just like, "Are you sure? Because like our friends won't be my friend if like I am like that." And she's like, "No, like you really don't like it. Like it's very obvious and apparent that you're like performing this to make us feel comfortable, and like we're gonna love you anyway." And so that was the first time I ever like acknowledged the fact that I might be non-binary, right? And so that's when I started that journey. And that was about 2000, 14-ish. But I didn't actually come out as trans non-binary and actually do, take testosterone, and I'm going to be having top surgery and things like that until, several years later. But it was that moment. It was like having friends in a community and knowing that I would be safe that finally allowed me to really like kind of come into my own. And I will tell you that it's tremendously impacted everything in my life, right? Because like, when people see me, like if there's family members who hadn't seen me in many years that saw me this weekend, they were like, "You seem happy." Right. And so it's that uplifting. It's like that weight that's been taken off of me so that I can be this free human instead of this performative person that existed before.
Wow. We have a lot of similarities there, especially when you said you had that community, that family, and that safety. That is what we are all looking for, but especially in this community. Thank you so much, B. Who would like to go next?
I'll chime in.
All right.
So my sex assigned at birth was female, but my first sentence was actually "I'm a boy." And I lived that statement until I was 19 years old. And I remember being attracted to women at the age of 5. Unlike B, I was very sexual from a young age. My first girlfriend was at 12 years old. To be honest, I'm a little envious because I wish I was asexual. It probably saved me from a lot of heartbreaks growing up. But anyway, I grew up near Los Angeles during the late 80s and early 90s. And there weren't a lot of queer folks around. So I thought I would, people thought I was a tomboy, and I played along because the few queer folks I knew got teased and bullied. And I officially came out about 3 years ago, and my parents and most of my friends, they initially rejected me. And it was really hard. Like, though the Black Employee Resource Group at my company took me under their wing. I think they saw and knew what it's like to be shunned and marginalized simply for being who you are. And so, I want to give a shout out to that group. Actually, Daryl Graves, who was one of the leaders of that group, is here, and they really supported me through that difficult transition. So that's my sexuality. And I agree what I believe Josh, you said that sexuality and gender identity is on a spectrum. And I've definitely gone through that spectrum all over the place, but this is where I am now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I remember I used to identify myself as a tomboy. One, because it was the only way I could get the girls to know I was gay. I had to dress like a boy. And then I just assumed that persona, even though I was terrible at it, because all the studs said, "You're not a stud." And I was like, "Yes, I am." but I totally understand the need to be in a box so you can be appreciated. And to Daryl Graves, thank you for being a representation of what the Black community does when we love on somebody and we want them to feel taken care of, because that's what Say experienced. I'm glad that you were able to do that, so thank you. We got Nick and Adi left. Who wants to go?
I can go. I can chime in.
All right.
Yes, 5th grade. You're gay. Had no idea what that meant. But that was what was told to me in my English class in the 5th grade, Miss Elliott's 5th grade class. No, I went through my younger years, middle school, high school, with identity issues. I didn't know who I was. In a small town that's predominantly white, you think that you're a white boy growing up for your first, several years. And now I think I'm a gay white boy. Then the first time someone calls you the N-word, then you realize, wait a minute. So therefore, all throughout probably my last year in high school, I graduated in 2011. I'm thinking that I am a queer white boy from the South. So coming out to my parents and coming out to others is almost as if, what am I coming out as? Because I don't even know who I am. So I had to come out to myself first. And with that, I started to learn very quickly who I am as a Black person, as a Black man in America. And I'm thankful for that. And I remember telling my parents that I was gay. And I thought my dad was actually going to have a really, really bad reaction. He's this huge masculine football guy. Mind you, he's in the Football Hall of Fame as well as college. So here's this, big masculine guy, and I'm about to come out to him as gay. And this part kind of goes into how I started my brand, but he basically just looked at me and just opened up his arms and said, I love you no matter what. And I thought that he would hate me. I was just expecting the worst. And it really wasn't. After I said that to him, I don't think he talked to me for like a week, because he could not believe that his own blood, his own son, would think that about his father. But, after learning who you are and, learning more about, coming out in the community, and then especially seeing that a lot of us in the Black community, being hypermasculine, that comes, and when you start to realize that about your own community and your people, of course, that's going to kind of naturally come to mind. But I'm actually thankful that my story is different. And I was actually accepted by my father and my family. Of course, there was a lot of questions and, but to this day, I'm more comfortable around them. I'm coming out more too. I believe I'm kind of with Josh here when kind of just experiencing my queerness, just being queer and thinking I was one way for a long time, and now just kind of like unlearning and doing. But it's always, it's a day to day. You're always coming out. You're always learning more about yourself. So that's
Wow.
Story.
That was actually super beautiful. I'm glad that he had so much love for you. He was mad at you for a week for underestimating the power of his love. When I hear people say that they're coming out or that they want to come out, it's very interesting. The people you assume will accept you, don't do that. We don't know if they're ready for that reality. And on the other hand, the people you are just absolutely certain they will shun you might be the most inviting. So to everyone listening, if there's ever anyone who feels comfortable enough to come out to you, give them the space, and if you are there, invite them and say it's okay. Watch the relief on their face. And if there's somebody you just automatically assume will not receive you, just give them a chance to prove you wrong before you make that assumption. Thank you so much, Nick. And then Adi, I think you're last.
Yeah, Nick, your coming out stories of your dad, it literally, I was clapping, being like, oh my God, my palms are sweaty even thinking about it, because I had a very similar experience. So I was assigned female at birth. I was raised to be a mother. I was raised to be a wife and understand my positionality to obtain both of those things. And my mother is Jehovah's Witness. Grew up Jehovah's Witness, is no longer affiliated with the religion. And when I came out to her, to Dominique's point, I thought that she was going to love me and have this positive response. And she was just like, please do not tell your father, because he will kick you out of the house. Like, I need you to not. And I didn't for several months. And my dad is this like big Puerto Rican man, like, you know, 6'2" dude who doesn't ask about your romantic relationships, doesn't ask any of his children, right, about your romantic relationships. And he was like, you got a boyfriend? One day, just like randomly. And I went upstairs and I packed my bags. I came downstairs and I had just turned 18. And I was like, Dad, I'm bi. And I just sobbed, and like my hands were in my face, you know, and I was just like, and I saw his hand go back, and I was like, here we go. Like, okay. And he was like, we be teenage pregnancy. What's up? Yes. Give me some high five. He was like, why are you crying though? Mira, stop crying. Why are you crying? You look so sad. What kind of girls you like? You got like girls with long hair, short hair? You like skinny girls? I bet you like big girls. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, my bags, mind you, my bags are packed upstairs, like fully planned. Like, my mother, his wife, told me I was getting kicked out. So like, there was nothing for me to believe otherwise. And it was a weird like twist that, you know, even in Holiday, etc., where all the men in my family, like, I had gone into the boys club, and I realized that the misogyny that was rampant in my family was a part of my acceptance, right? The clear objectification of women was the reason why the men in my family accepted me.
Oh.
And then when I came out as trans, right, I was just met with complete like anger, confusion, and mainly disgust. That the conversation and where I thought my family, my dad was going to be more supportive, he was just like, I don't get it. Like, what is this? So it's definitely been like the first time a little bumpy, kind of hilarious. Second time was just a complete disaster. It was coming out as trans was significantly worse than coming out in my sexuality, for sure, in my family.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And what a twist and a turn. The beauty in all of these stories is that we are reflecting the spectrum of identity and sexuality. The challenge, particularly in the US, is that we want to put people in a box for us. I want to call people with they, them pronouns, she, her, because it makes me comfortable. It doesn't have anything to do with me. It is about them and how we appreciate and acknowledge and respect each other's identity. And that's what this storytelling allows, because you don't know who in the office wants to come out or does not want to come out. How you treat and interact with this community, these stories help to provide some context, because you never know where we've come from. Now, that was you all's experience coming out, but now we're in corporate America. We're adults now, and we're in the office, and we also happen to have this intersectional identity of either our gender and our race, one or the other, etc. So can you tell me, to what degree does your identity negatively or positively impact your ability to navigate corporate spaces? And let's start with Say.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, my hair used to be long, and when I first cut my hair like it is now, honestly, within a couple months, I was, somebody at the company asked me to do less speaking engagements, both internally and externally. I was specifically asked to be more discretionary about my social media activity, even though it didn't violate the company's social media policy. I talked to my manager about it. I spoke to other BIPOCs in my org, and I spoke to my mentor at the company, and they confirmed my concerns. They validated me. You know, I was questioning myself. I was gaslighting myself. I'm like, is this really happening? Like, is this like, I cut my hair and this is going down? And they pretty much confirmed my concerns about discrimination. And I eventually did flag it with HR, and I decided to leave that company. That, you know, wasn't too long ago, unfortunately. So definitely have experienced being treated differently, like due to my sexuality, and it was rough.
Does that make you want to advocate more, or in any way kind of go into a shell? Does it, some people have an adverse reaction. They just want to step back because they don't want to experience that again. Did it make you want to be more of an advocate?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, your amygdala tries to tell you fight, flight, freeze, or befriend, tend and befriend. I decided that's exactly why I went full-fledged into another role around DEI, because I never want anyone to experience that. And especially getting more involved with the Black ERG, I realized I really need to advocate for the marginalized, for those, and it's super subtle. Like, unfortunately, like in the corporate world, you almost feel like you're going crazy. And, there was like a lot of like subtle gaslighting and stuff like that. And and that's why, for me, the way I approach DEI work is I'm very honest, I'm very vulnerable, I'm very transparent, and I'm like, let's get it on the table, let's talk about this. Let's not do this manipulation, gaslighting business. Like, let's be open and really get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. And the reason why I asked is because I feel like when people interact with the LGBTQ community in the office, we're like the fun group. We're the one you go to the parade for, and we do all the happy things, and we have the rainbow. But the extent of our pain and the trauma we go through is almost never discussed, as if we're supposed to be joyful and jovial all the time. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I'm going to go to Adi because I made an assumption of Adi's identity, and I was wrong. This event is titled Black and Indigenous Persons of Color, LGBTQ+. But not only does the term BIPOC come with its own set of issues, because it inadequately and in many ways incorrectly identifies this community. It's too broad. We're trying to include everybody. It also is a misnomer. So Adi, really quickly, can you help us with your identity and what it means in the context of a discussion like this, where you refer to as BIPOC?
Yes. It does talk about the question before about how my experience intersected. I can't even talk today. How my experience as somebody who is trans, non-binary, and Latinx shows up at work. And I was actually talking about this exact thing earlier today, that my experiences are significantly different than Black, Indigenous, and people of color because I inhabit a white body. And it is a very commonly, wildly misunderstood thing that being Latinx equates you to being a person of color. And that is not true of my experience, because I have been discriminated against for my name, for my speaking Spanish, for my food, for music, my culture, but I have fundamentally never been discriminated against for my skin, which absolutely plays into how I navigate the workplace. I am significantly more palatable, I'm significantly more digestible, and because people see white skin and they're not wrong with that. I think some of the problems that come into play here is when we fundamentally are conflating race and racism, right? Is that race isn't bad, racism is bad. Being white is not bad, but whiteness is. White supremacy is. And that distinction, right? The term Latinx encompasses over 20 countries, 400 different languages, or 30 countries, 400 different languages. There's no chance that all of our representation is accurate with that term. And that includes in the Latinx community, Black and Indigenous erasure. So Afro-Latinx, Indigenous, Afro-Indigenous, Latinx people, even Asian Latinx people that are misrepresented and policed out of my community. And there's a responsibility, Dom, I called Dom being hey, I'm going to be on the, I want to talk with you because we have a lot to talk about. And organizing based off of identity isn't always helpful because, one, I'm not POC. I do not live a a person with melanin, I don't have that experience in the United States. And that is important when we are ruled and governed, not only in a settler colony, but by white supremacy.
And the reason why, thank you for sharing that. The reason why I wanted you all to hear that is because, again, this conversation continues to evolve. These terms may not be used in a year or two from now. Remember when it was just L or just G? Now we are all the way at at WXYZ, and it will continue to expand. The same thing goes in terms of the gender spectrum and also ethnicity and how we look at race. That all is about to change. All I want you all to do is be prepared to be flexible, because what you think you know today is only a function, or is only a fraction of what you should know, what you could know, and this is simply an opportunity for you to hear other experiences. Now, we are almost 40 minutes in, and my favorite part of having panels is to ask the audience questions. But before I do that, one, I want you all, if you have any questions, to please prepare them. I would love for the audience to at least answer one or two, but I have one more question for everyone, unless you are particularly passionate about questions I've already asked. But for my panelists, what is one action you would like everyone on this call to take today in order to help us better support each other in this community? Because there's a lot of talk happening right now. There's been talk happening for over 30 years. And look at where we are today. It's a shame. We should be further along. So in order to do that, we all have to be active. So what does that look like to you all as panelists? And I'll give you an easy example. I'm gonna take it off the table because I don't want any of you to say it. I was speaking with, I believe it was Say. I think I was on a panel with Say, and they were explaining to me the significance of pronouns. And immediately when I was done with that conversation, I just went and changed my LinkedIn page. It was, not only was it not a big deal for me, but it was also so important to them that I did it, and that was small. So that's just one example. I'm throwing that out there. If you haven't done it on your LinkedIn page, I encourage you to do so. Now I'm gonna pass it over to Nick and ask you to kick it off with one thing you would ask of the folks who joined us today.
The one thing that comes to me, the one thing that just sits on my heart, and it's, you know, it's kind of vague. It's not necessarily such a tangible thing like, you know, going to LinkedIn or anything like that. But, you know, a lot of us are really going through some things right now, where a lot of us are struggling with identities and just this whole year. And, you know, what's going to end up happening is exactly what Dominique said. The language that we use now, it can be different, you know, a year or two from now. And my only thing I would like y'all to take away is to just truly listen. Just listen to what people are saying. Listen and apply. Truly just listen. Because when you really start to hear, at the end of the day, you know, if our hearts are all in, we're all together. We're all trying to have a collective move, and we just all want just community, and we just want a place where we all belong. But people don't want to listen. People are hard-headed. People are just so one way. Just listen. That's all I have to say.
Oh my God, I want to hug you. Okay. Who wants to go next? Josh, what do you think? Josh or B?
Yeah, I'm happy to go. This is a big question. I think there's so much we could all be doing all of the time. I think in a broad sense, it's imperative for us to kind of constantly be challenging the status quo and doing so in a way that really opens up like more space for more people to just be included in conversations. I think that's something that I'm always trying to do. I try to connect people. I try to elevate and lift people up. But I will say for me, bringing a mindfulness to what you're doing and really walking through life with intentionality and understanding the urgency of the moment we're in, because we are truly in the midst of history and it's unfolding every day and every moment. And I think just understanding the choices that we're making and the choices sometimes we're not making and the impact that that's having. And I'll double down on what Nick was saying around, you know, being in community, listening and seeing people for how they want to be seen is so critical. I think about the ways that I've chosen to show up for community. And, you know, in the wakes of so many murders of, you know, Black people with police brutality, there's so much that I can do, but I think like I take the micro actions of reaching out to my Black friends and just checking in with them. And I'm just like, hey, how are you doing? And, you know, it's those micro actions that unite us, because I think we need to come together and just stand in solidarity, so we can actually create this new world that we want together and find strength in that community. So yeah, do what you can for yourself, do what you can for others, but really be thinking about it all the time, I think is my takeaway.
Thank you so much. And thank you also for texting me intermittently as all of these things that happen. You've been very consistent in following up, Josh, and practicing what you preach. So thank you so much. B, what you got for us?
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think people need to be curious. You know, like we kind of go through this world with all these assumptions. And there's the ones that we inherit from our family, there's the ones that we inherit from our friends, and then the ones that, like, you know, that kind of sprout up because we're too afraid to even interrogate our own experiences, right? And so I think you have to be curious because, you know, even for myself, the reason I felt comfortable coming out as trans is because I actually started finding out what transgender was, right? You know, so like I had to go and do that and kind of interrogate myself and say, and challenge myself and say, am I uncomfortable with this because I'm actually uncomfortable with this? Or am I just afraid, right? Because that's the thing, like when you actually start take a step back and you start, you know, learning and educating and seeking out other people, other communities, it completely changes your life, right? Because you're bringing all of that knowledge and all of that love. I was talking on a panel, and this woman, it was just so great because she's like, when you're curious, it completely changes your brain, right? It changes your brain to have the capacity to understand things differently, but then it physically changes your entire body, which means that your heart is going to pump a little bit better. Your lungs are going to breathe a little bit better. And so when you think about that, it also makes you healthier, right? So it's like, be curious because it literally will save your life. And thus it could also save other people's lives.
Wow. See, this is why I curated this panel. Can't tell me to come on now. Adi or Say? Say.
Adi, please. Adi, go ahead.
Adi, go ahead. We're on mic drop with Say.
I think humility for me, and like actually humility and orientation. In like orienting, like I really want people to have a North Star, you know, like what are we using our time, our energy, and our resources towards? And if it's not big, if it's not something big like Black liberation or Indigenous sovereignty, you know, if it doesn't make your bones shake, if you're like, I don't know if I'm going to see that in my lifetime, you know, it's just not big enough. And I think when we orient ourselves to something bigger, we can have more humility, we can have more curiosity, because it's in the name of also something that's beyond us. And that's it. Like, I don't ever say if I mess up, I say when I mess up. My humanity will always show itself. I will always fuck it up. Sorry, but I will. And that's the truth of it.
Humility is huge, and not enough of us have it, and that includes myself. We are programmed to be right, to be the smartest one, to have the fastest answer, to blah, blah, blah. But actually you learn more when you're wrong, because you learn another way to do something differently and a different way of thinking. So thank you so much for that recommendation. Now Say, bring us home.
All right. The one action I would encourage us going into 2021 is that we are at an inflection point, especially around systemic racism, and we got to all double down and get this to become transformative work and not just performative work. In terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. So what I would encourage you to do is 80% of your work needs to be hidden underwater. We're like a glacier. And I love what Nick said, I believe, in Adi, like it's the humility as well as the listening. So like a glacier, you only have the small parts be visible, right? In terms of the work that you're doing. And you're also going to get bumped in advocacy work. And so all of us need to do the transformative work that changes what's within the mug, right? What racism we're all, and biases that we all have, like change what's inside here. So when we do get bumped in advocacy work, the right thing comes out. Deep humility, as you know, Adi talked about, and the deep listening, and the right energy overflows when we're doing this work. I would encourage like practical deep listening is follow Black voices. Like I have been following, you know, Austin Channing Brown, but one resource that I absolutely love is Justice in June. It has 10, 25, 45 minutes a day tracks that you can actually read, watch, and take action in very, you know, very practical ways of doing the transformative work and the advocacy that we all need to do. And the last thing I'll talk about is exactly what Josh put in the chat: vote. We are really at an inflection point. We have to be loud right now to bring about the change that needs to happen right now.
I'm going to say votes times 16, because I'm not going to say it 16 times, but this isn't, I'm kind of going to demand you to vote. It is your civic duty. It's kind of your job as a U.S. citizen. Whatever your reasons are for not voting is a vote for the other person, and that wouldn't be conducive to our collective health. In fact, we could be one of the largest communities to face discrimination in ways we haven't in decades if this goes in a different direction. So I'm asking that you all please use this privilege. This is a privilege to vote. Let's be clear. There are people in other places in this world who, even if they did vote, it might not matter, it might not count, and other places cannot. So for our safety, for your safety, for your family's safety, your children's safety, and the generations ahead of the future, please vote. So we got time for 2 questions and at least 1 or 2 panelists to answer them. I would love to take one or 2 questions from the group, and don't put it in the chat. You can unmute and speak to us. We'd love to get that engagement from you as well before we close out. Lexi, I saw your hand. I knew it. I just knew it. I just love your energy. Hit us with it, sis.
Hi, everyone. How are you? This
With
was
a new twist. I see your hair.
Always and forever. You know, the white people at work are like, what is that? It's a different conversation. Thank you so much for being here. This is a wonderful panel, and I know many of the panelists personally, and I just love watching all of you shine and not grow, but make other people grow. And so from an emotional perspective, it's just beautiful. Your magic is eluding and everything. So my question is, as an ally, as a very, very strong ally, and I know that you talked about what do we need to do as a collective, but I do think that white straight supremacy is real. So as an ally to the queer community, what do you need to see from us for change, for your humanity to be known and to be lifted, and for equity for your people?
Wow. Who is ready to tackle a Lexi question?
I am.
All right, Nick, let's go.
What a wonderful question. You know, it's so funny, Dominique, if you remember, it was on the panel last year. That was one of our last questions, and it still stays to this day. For one, like I said earlier, listen, however, the space that you are in when you don't have anyone that looks like us, a representation of any other, that's the time for you to shine. Your space. Like I used to tell some of my friends, I have a few white friends back at home. Like I used to tell them, I used to say, you know, with this, you know, with Black Lives Matter and everything going on, I said, the best thing for you to do is to listen. And when you're at your predominantly white job, when you're sitting at your predominantly white boardroom, when you're at your predominantly white church, wherever you are, that's the time for you to shine. That's the time for you to speak, because there's certain conversations that are different when you're in a more comfortable looking space, if you know what I mean. So when you're there, that's when it's time for you to clock whatever is wrong. That's time for you to be the ally and the advocate for us, because we're not in these spaces all the time, but you are. So as an ally, it's time for you to really speak up and become that advocate in that space that is just designed mostly for you, and that may not have an other or anything, you know what I'm trying to say here. But yes, so yes, when you're in those spaces, that's the time for you to really shine.
Yep. And what I would say to that, Nick, I was thinking this earlier, which is what you're saying, is use your power. If you are in a room and it is specifically talking about anything that could impact the LGBTQ community, if we were left out of the conversation, if we're talking about a large demographic and we are in no way represented in that room, that's when we need you to say, well, what about? Or have we considered? Or we should allocate this amount of money? Or we need to partner with this organization. If you are in the room, if you are, whatever your degree of privilege, 2 legs, 1 leg, 1 eye, $1,000, $15,000, I don't care what it is, that is when we need you to speak. When you can use your power for the benefit of somebody else, that's what we're looking for. Is that what you were referring to, Nick?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of us, we have sat at that table when it was just us, and we've noticed, well, you did not say one thing about
yes,
what we need. And, you know, we even said this last year on the panel, we're tired.
yes.
We're tired, so tired. So we've been doing this all our lives, advocating, fighting, just going. And it doesn't go anywhere when we walk out and it's just the same. But you as an ally, you have that privilege to change that and to open other people's eyes. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing right there.
Thank you so much. And now we have one more. Oh, I see, Daryl, I see your comment, but I heard somebody else who was about to make a comment. B, go ahead.
Yeah, so just one other thing. So we also have some people, I think, in the audience who are white passing, who are part of the LGBTQ community. So it's also about your privilege as a white LGBTQ plus member, right? So for instance, there was a tweet that went around when Juneteenth, when companies started providing Juneteenth as a day off, where this gay guy was like, hey, the blacks, like, you know, this is our month. You don't get to celebrate in our month, right? Written, and then it was like from the gays. And I was like, I'm a part of this community, bro. Like, I am definitely a part of this community. And I've been celebrating Juneteenth since way before, you know, you ever had, you know, Pride Month. And so I think that's another part of it. So I want to say that it's not just about like if you're heterosexual, right? It's not just if you're like a white heterosexual person. It's also if you're a white LGBTQ person. It's if you're a black, you know, heterosexual person. It's if you're a Latinx heterosexual person. There's a lot of layers to how you need to be advocating, because you have a lot of privilege that people like us who have so many diverse characteristics, right? We don't get invited to those spaces. And so there's a lot of different people who have a responsibility to challenge and stand up for us so that we can be heard and be seen and have the same opportunities as you do.
Absolutely. And the easiest thing I would say is, what would you do if somebody treated your child the way some people treat us? We're so protective of our children. If your child comes out gay or straight or whatever their storyline is, you would probably protect them with all of your being if you're open-minded. I kind of need you to take care of us in that same vein, because we're probably volunteering in your communities. We're probably going to schools with your kids. They probably do see us with our wives or our husbands and our spouses, and they have no idea what's going on. And you're the person that has to explain that to them when they get home. So I ask that you use that privilege to protect us the same way you would want someone to care for your child should their lives experience something you could have never predicted. And if it's not your child, your nieces, your nephews, or anyone else that you can feel that connection with. And then we have time for one more question. I'm so delighted for this conversation. And it has been recorded for those for you to watch later. But one more question. Come on, we got to go out with a bang. If we don't, I'm going to make up one more question. And if not, any other final? Oh, there you go. Is it Tara or Tara?
It's Tara. Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm just wondering, like, the world is an intense place right now, and it gives me so much joy to hear everyone's stories and to see all of your faces. I'm wondering what's giving you strength and energy right now.
Oh, that's a positive way to end. Thank you so much. And I think all of you can kind of quickly say what's giving you strength and energy. And anybody else, if you're not doing this and you can do it, start taking notes. I'm going to pick on Adi.
Community, right? I think being in in community with people who share my same values, my same principles, politic and practice, has been reminding me that there is absolute hope. And, you know, y'all being here and present is a part of that. So yeah, thanks.
Community. All right. So if you don't have one, now's the time to build and find one. What about you, Nick?
Community is definitely great. Family, of course, but one thing that I've definitely picked up this year was just getting more grounded with nature, yoga. For all those people who are out there who don't mind, but the use of healing antidotes like you know, shrooms, or, you know, of course, you know, marijuana, all those that come from, you know, Mother Earth are, you know, just been really healing and very comforting during this time. So I would have to say that for sure.
Yep. Self-care. Self-care is what Tracy Lamb put in the group, and we hear a lot about self-care. Here's the thing, y'all. They say when you're on the airplane, put your mask on first. You want to know why? Because if you pass out, you can't help the person to the left. So I'm gonna need you all to go take a Epsom salt bath, go pray if you need to, walk down the street at night when it's quiet, put some headphones on, whatever you need to do to reset. Do that, because we need you strong for tomorrow, because today is almost done and the work continues. So thank you so much, Nick. Say, what you got for us?
I would say reparenting your inner child. So I've been taking like biology of belonging boot camp with Raj Kumari Niyoji. I'll drop their link into the chat. But they do free boot camps, and it's all about helping, because we don't realize that epigenetics actually plays into our experience of racism and bias. So it's really important to really meet that inner child in all of us. And I've just been, even in this difficult time, playing a lot and listening to stand up. I love Trevor Noah. Shout out to Trevor Noah and Hannah Gatsby. So that's why we recommend, even though it's heavy, you got to laugh, you got to have fun, you got to play and be a kid in the midst of all this to re-energize yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a huge, and that can be playing a video game. It can be downloading an app where you're playing Tetris, whatever you need to do, going outside and playing. That is huge, huge, excellent idea. Thank you so much. And then we got B, and then Josh, did I get it ready? Is it B?
Yeah, so it's actually, so I'm a product person, right? So I like to plan, like I like to create a roadmap for my life and also my work. So actually, so my wife and I, like it's actually really interesting. So when I was coming up, you know, the first thing you said, the people would say if you were a lesbian is you're not going to have kids, right? So we actually made the decision. We started family planning. We were actually at the doctor this morning, got all of our blood work done and all that good stuff.
Yay.
So for me, you know, looking forward to building this family, but also creating this plan, this like roadmap of what we think our life will be, and then executing on it. So something I always tell people is, you know, you have to order your steps, you know, and if you don't do that, then when it falters, you're like, why did it happen? Well, you know what, if you kind of put forth those things, and they really do come together, right? If you actually put that out there in the world.
That was excellent. And Order My Steps is a gospel song. So if you are, I'm just going to go play it when I'm done.
Gospel. I was like, I'm singing it right now.
I'm in the church.
No.
I think
My
Josh,
dad is a Baptist minister.
there you go. Oh my goodness. We're going to have another, that's going to be another, we're going to talk about religion and spirituality in the LGBTQ community in another session. Josh, are you my last one?
Yes, lots of pressure, but you know, plus one to what everyone said, I think self-care is deeply personal, and I think whatever works for you is kind of what the key to figuring that out is. For me, it's actually a balance, because I'm like you, I'm such a project manager and such a like efficiency guru that I'm always trying to plan stuff, and I've actually been deconstructing my relationship with productivity and finding a lot of joy in just like small things, and you know, having a daily gratitude practice. And I love what Say was saying, just like trying to infuse more play into my day. That way it doesn't feel like it's all work and then like work on top of work. But yeah, you know, just good meals, lots of, you know, silly TV shows, good music.
Thank you so much. We are at time, but what I'd like to say first, a huge thank you. If you all can just give me some what is it, prayer hands, some jazz hands for our panelists, and thank them for their time. Let us, everybody do it at the same time, and it's recorded. I want to say I'm so proud of all of you. Despite what circumstances have confronted you, you still were not only a soldier for yourself, but now you can be a voice for others. So to that I say, I am grateful to you. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for allowing me to grow from you. And I hope everyone in this room has grown from you as well. I'd also like to share that I would reach out to these wonderful panelists, not engage or to include them. I'd love for you to do that, so that you can continue to hear from them when other people can benefit from them as well. And then lastly, I'm going to say, I consider myself, my favorite Avenger is Nick Fury, because he goes around collecting superheroes. And I consider myself to be Nick Fury. So I thank all of you for being superheroes in your own walk. To everyone who has joined us today, my ask of you is to lean into your superpower. What do you do well that no one else does? I talk a lot. That could be a pro or a con. I've decided to leverage that as a pro. So I curate conversations with very critical thinkers who also have diverse experiences, and then I bring it to you all. So what is your gift? If it is project management, if it is design, how do you then use that and your privilege in order to affect change? So I'm going to ask you to channel your power. So when I call on you as Nick Fury, you're ready for the call. Thank you all so much. I want you to have a fantastic weekend, and I look forward to working with you all, and I'll see you at another 360 event. Thank you, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.